Months before her murder, a woman believed that she was being stalked by an ex-boyfriend who continued to send her very threatening messages. And then she was brutally killed. You may think that that's all in the case and that you don't need to watch further, but I promise some of the things that this man did were very concerning and disturbing, and I urge you to listen to this whole story and listen to Crystal Krug's story, because she truly lived in fear for months prior to her death, and you'll hear that she did all of the right things for her safety of her family, which she didn't know may have included the person who was causing all of this. You are such a genuine gem. I'm Brooke Makenna, and I urge you, if this is the first time that you are seeing me, to go ahead and subscribe if you want more videos like this one. And if you enjoy my videos, please sign up for the Genuine Gem newsletter so I can personally send you my videos when YouTube forgets to do so, and also send you real-time updates of true crime cases. This is actually a surprise Wednesday video. I have been toying with the idea of 2 videos per week, and when I mentioned it in a prior video, you guys really seemed excited for it. So I would, I think, love to try out doing Wednesdays and Sunday uploads, both at 9 a.m. CST. Let me know if you are going to be here for every video. So now let's get into the story. It was 2023 in Colorado, and the Krug family lived in Denver. Their home was in the suburbs, filled with Daniel and Crystal and their 3 kids, who were 14, 11, and 8. Now, Daniel worked at the State Department, while Crystal worked in technology and innovation at Allegiant Technologies. Crystal actually had a degree in biochemical engineering, and she had a passion for performing arts and dancing, but her children were the lights of her life. She devoted every spare ounce of energy that she had to their happiness and their interest. Crystal was known for her kindness, her infectious laughter. She was inspired by those around her, and her warm spirit was said to create camaraderie wherever she went. She was even loved by coworkers. However, on December 14th of 2023, a welfare check would be called in for her home at the 3100th block of Promontory Lope in the Anthem Highlands neighborhood. A police officer would arrive at her home around 1 p.m. to find her on the floor in the garage. Crystal was found to be murdered at 43 years old. The officer would claim he was looking through windows and saw a female on the ground with a bright red blood smear on the drywall on the south wall of the garage. She was actually lying on her back near the stairs from the garage to the house on the southwest corner of the garage. There was also blood on the wall near her head, and there was blood on the floor near her. Crystal's body was still warm, but it did not have a pulse. She was transported to the Good Samaritan Hospital and pronounced dead at 12:43 p.m. Crystal appeared to have been beaten and stabbed to death. Now, investigators found that this welfare check had actually been requested by her husband, Daniel. He had called the police while at work when she failed to respond to some text messages. He said she had actually sent him a text prior saying that he needed to come and pick up one of their kids because she had a meeting with a detective about a stalking case. Now, investigators were at the crime scene, and they would locate 3 surveillance cameras around the residence. However, none of the 3 were recording that morning, the time of the attack. There was also a camera in the garage which would have shown the killer. However, this was also not recording, and it was covered in tape. The Ring camera had also been turned off, and her husband Daniel had no explanation for why they were all off at the time. Crystal was found to have taken the kids to school that morning before returning home. And on her person, Crystal was found to have her concealed carry firearm. She had not been able to get this out to use it to protect herself when she was attacked. Investigators also spoke to the detective who was working with Crystal on this stalking case, and they claimed that they had no plans to meet the day of the murder like Daniel was saying she texted him about. When investigators began to question those who knew Crystal, her mother said that she did have a stalker, that was the reason that why the cameras were up at her home. And when officers searched the neighborhood for their surveillance cameras, none of the neighbors' footage showed an unknown person entering or exiting this house in the hours prior to or after her murder. Now, Crystal's autopsy report would reveal that she had at least 2 blunt force trauma wounds to the back of her neck, and she also had a stab wound to the left side inside of her heart. You see, less than 2 months before she was found, Christy had gone to the police department on October 31st to report that her ex-boyfriend, Jack Anthony Holland, who she had not seen in 20 years, had possibly become her stalker. Crystal told the officers that they ended their relationship in 2000, but her ex would occasionally message her over the years. There were sometimes these crude messages, wanting to meet up, but she was never very concerned because when she didn't answer, he also did not follow up. But that would change at this point because her ex had sent her messages in 2002, 2005, 2010, and 2016. But Crystal stated that she got married to Daniel in 2007 and they had been together ever since, so she wasn't ever worried about her ex-boyfriend. Crystal never reported these texts before. They didn't concern her, but it was different this time. Crystal had notified her employer of these threats, gotten a new phone, and even created pick-up and drop-off plans that were different for her children so that they would be safe. It all started on October 2nd with a message saying, "It's Anthony. Hope it's okay, I looked you up." Because Crystal reported that back when it started in the fall of 2023 on October 2nd, she got a text from her ex asking if she wanted to hook up while he was in town. She ignored this, and normally this worked. He wouldn't text her again, but this time more texts started coming in. It appeared as though this lack of response had angered him. He began to say that she was being watched by him. She was sent a photo of her car in front of the dentist's office where she had an appointment that day. On Halloween, she received a picture of her husband Daniel getting out of his car at work. One of the texts that were sent at this point was saying that her husband was a loser. When this photo of her husband came in, she immediately went to the police to file a harassment report. She was more worried about her husband and her family at this time than she even was of herself. But she started getting emails as well, noting that her license plate was expired, which she told police was correct, and it appeared as though the stalker was in the area watching her and her husband. So Crystal had brought in this spreadsheet log of her history with her ex. She told the detective it was exhausting and there was a barrage of contact coming from all directions all the time. She didn't know when her stalker was going to just come out of the bushes. She was obviously distraught and agitated. On November 13th, Crystal went back to the police with an even more concerning message. She had received a message saying, "I'll save you. Help me get rid of him and we get away. I know he's stopping you from talking to me. You don't want him. I know you want me." The texts were saying that Daniel couldn't satisfy her, he didn't deserve her, and that all she had to do was give him the signal and her husband wouldn't come home because he was able to park at her husband's work and walk right in to his workplace. At this point, police did send surveillance to Daniel's work as well as their residence, but the messages kept coming in, saying things like, "I know how to satisfy you, you don't belong in that big house, you belong with me, and I'll get rid of him and then we can be together." Crystal was fearful for her safety at this point and the safety of her family. She texted her family members, "This is making me very scared. He may very well escalate to approaching me in person because he promised to see me soon in the last message. When he does, I don't think it will be to say hi." She then decided to place those surveillance cameras outside of her home to ease her anxiety. She skipped her daughter's performance in the Nutcracker because all of the dance community knew about the situation and were afraid. She also brought a gun for protection, but the messages continued on December 5th and December 6th. And then she was found murdered on December 14th. But the next day after the murder on December 15th, Crystal's mother and family members were telling the authorities that along with this stalker and the creepy messages, Crystal also wasn't happy in her marriage. The couple were actually having problems. Her mother told police about a photo that Crystal had shown her on her phone that she said she was going to use to seek full custody of the children against Daniel. So Crystal's mother was asked to come back in for a follow-up interview the next day where she told authorities Crystal was planning on leaving her husband and she was moving up the timeline to do so for their separation. Daniel allegedly knew this, so that same day of the interview on December 16th, Daniel Krug would be arrested by Broomfield police at the King Soopers store for the murder of his wife. During interrogation, Daniel told police that he left about 20 minutes later than usual the morning of the murder because he had unexplainable stomach trouble. He was implying he had diarrhea. He said that he was still at home when Crystal returned from dropping off the kids, which was abnormal for him, and that she inquired about him being home, but he denied that they had any argument or physical altercation between them and that he went to work after that. Now, his arrest affidavit stated that Daniel Krug was the last person to see Crystal alive, and the only person to also have access to the residential cameras in their home to manually turn them off, besides Crystal, of course. Crystal was also said by her family and friends to be someone who would fight back and defend herself. She also had that, but there was no sign of a struggle at the residence. And due to her firearm still being on her person and unused, investigators believe this indicated she was taken by surprise or by someone familiar. But what about her stalker ex-boyfriend? Well, Bloomfield police had seized the phones of Crystal and Daniel Krug, and they had also identified and located the ex-boyfriend of Crystal, who was Jack Anthony Holland. He was found to be living in Utah, which was about 8 hours and 500 miles away from Colorado. His alibi was that on the night of the murder, he was with his wife in his Utah home. Of course, on a strong alibi, a wife is going to give that alibi to their husband. However, his phone was seized, and investigators found no evidence of texts sent to Crystal's phone. So that's when they began to track the IP address of the messages sent to Crystal from her alleged stalker. That's when investigators found that the messages originated from an IP address in Colorado near her husband's workplace.
According to court documents, Broomfield police gathered data from an app called TextNow and from Gmail, both used to send those messages. Investigators quickly concluded they didn't come from an old boyfriend outside Colorado. Instead, they originated from the Internet Protocol address at Daniel Krug's office at the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment.
They also found a purchase of a burner phone using a gift card registered to Daniel that he had bought at Walgreens. This phone often pinged at the same locations as his regular phone. When he was questioned about this, he couldn't provide an explanation on why the messages from the ex-boyfriend appeared to be coming from him. And when detectives confronted him with the ex-boyfriend's alibi, Daniel just accused Crystal of having more affairs, that this must have been somebody else. He also rolled his eyes at the implication that he could have done this, saying it's always the husband. But due to this, the Broomfield police believed that they had probable cause that Daniel had committed murder in the first degree.
Daniel Krug is being held on a $5 million cash bail. He's scheduled to be back in court February 22nd for a preliminary hearing. Court documents show that former boyfriend has been ruled out of any involvement in this killing.
On December 21st, the DA officially filed a first-degree murder charge against him. But Daniel's family and supporters, they set up actually a crowdfunding site to help counter the terrible accusations against him. They believed the real perpetrator was still at large and that Daniel was terrified and deeply betrayed by this whole situation. This raised about $6,000. At a hearing in May of 2024, 43-year-old Daniel pleaded not guilty to the charges of murder, stalking, and criminal impersonation. Judge Priscilla Lau then reprimanded Daniel for having contact with his children. The prosecution asked that the contact between Daniel and the children be stopped because he was allegedly trying to ruin the investigation with these phone calls, and the defense argued that the content of the calls were being mischaracterized, so ultimately the judge did not cease all contact, but reminded him he can't talk about the case. Now, the prosecution alleged that Daniel had spent months stalking his wife or pretending to stalk his wife as one of her ex-boyfriends to frame him for the murder. His trial was set for October 2024 and it was postponed until 2025. Prosecution told the court that Christy knew her marriage was over and had suspicions that her husband might actually be the one sending the stalking messages. She was trying to put the pieces together, and she was doing so, and Daniel knew he was running out of time. The prosecution alleged that he had searches on his phone of head trauma the night before the murder. Prosecution laid out that the day of the murder, Daniel was waiting in the garage when she got home from dropping off the kids to attack her. He then used his wife's phone to send text, including one that claimed that she was having an affair. Then he drove to work. But the prosecution claims that Crystal hadn't answered Daniel's first text as the ex-boyfriend when she first got it, and so he sent one to his own phone from the murder phone saying, "Test." He then had made Google searches, like I said, the day before the murder, asking about head trauma. These included, when is head injury a cause for concern? What happens when you're knocked unconscious? And how hard for head trauma to go unconscious? But the defense, on the other hand, claimed that there was no physical evidence linking Daniel to the violent killing. He stated no blood was found in his car or on his clothes, which his daughter claimed were the same clothes that he was wearing that morning before they went to school. The defense also said that Daniel's DNA was not found at the crime scene, but a partial DNA from an unknown person was found on her neck. Then there was also the unknown DNA that was found on the tape of the garage surveillance camera. The defense claimed it was simply sloppy police work that failed to keep Crystal safe and then bungled the investigation of her death. They argued that the detective who was investigating the stalking was lazy and incompetent, and the police failed to test Crystal's phone for fingerprints, even though they claimed that Daniel had taken it after the murder to text on her behalf. So the defense urged the jurors to not find him guilty, saying that this was the last link in this awful train for this family. But the jurors would hear that a month before Crystal's murder, Daniel had actually cried to the police for failing to protect his family from the stalker terrorizing them. He told officers, "I'm panicking and I'm doing a shit job of protecting my wife. I'm sorry about this. I wear a mask around the kids." He was slumped over the desk crying in this footage. But Crystal's mother and brother testified that Crystal was moving up the timeline for the divorce because she could not stand the man she married. She'd actually moved her belongings out of their bedroom and was sleeping in their son's room. She said she had no love left for Daniel, and this is when all the stalking began. Her aunt said that while Crystal thought it could be her ex, she also didn't rule out the possibility that it could be her husband. She was becoming increasingly paranoid. Her mother said they were in a parking lot one day and Crystal just broke down, fell to her knees, and collapsed into tears. She felt helpless. Her mother said that Daniel wasn't taking the stalking very seriously, but her brother said that at a party they had in November of 2023, Daniel seemed quite paranoid, and he would stand up anytime a car would drive by and he would take pictures of the vehicle. Crystal's brother testified that she was very frustrated with the lack of police action in her stalking case. He said that after his sister's death, he was informed by detectives that they had suspected Daniel since November in the stalking case, but hadn't told Crystal this. It was also found that her phone number and name had been placed on an ad on a hookup site, and this caused Crystal to begin to receive unsolicited pictures of men and unwanted offers for sex around this time, and she was worried that one of these men would find out where she lived and try to get to her as well. This was found to be created by an email address using elements of Crystal's ex's name, but it was created on the Wi-Fi at Daniel's job. Crystal's mother testified that the morning of Crystal's death, Daniel had actually called her to say he hadn't heard from his wife. She said it was unusual because he appeared agitated and anxious, and she had never heard him like that before. She immediately drove to Crystal's home, where she found that the police were already there. She panicked. She went around to the side of the garage and she saw her daughter lying on the garage floor. She said that Daniel showed up last, and body cam footage showed that he showed up panting and distraught. He parked his car across the street and he ran over and he just started sobbing in the arms of loved ones. When he was asked for permission to search the house, he exclaimed, "Go, go, go." And then he was rocking back and forth. He was falling on his knees. He had his head in his hands. But the next day, Crystal's mother said that Daniel was talking to her about selling the house and getting rid of Crystal's clothes. Now, a video of the interview of Daniel after his wife's death was shown to the jury, and he was sobbing, he was rocking back and forth, mumbling, and had these gestures that appeared that he was helpless. He appeared to be struggling for air. He had told detectives he had been late that morning to work, but had last seen Crystal in the kitchen. But he did oddly add at this time that Crystal had been mysteriously disappearing recently and keeping secrets. Now, Crystal's ex-boyfriend and the man who is believed to be almost framed for her murder, Jack Anthony Holland, would testify. He claimed that he was unaware that his college girlfriend and his first love, who he met when he was 17 and she was 18, was murdered. until the police showed up at his door on December 14th. He had admitted that he did email her back in 2004 to check in to see how she was doing, and she said she couldn't talk because her boyfriend would get mad at her. He then contacted her a few years later through Facebook, and they became friends. However, he said they stopped being friends, and she blocked him after he sent a message to her. He said he couldn't remember the message, but when he was asked if it was him possibly confessing his love for her, he said probably. Now, Anthony was uncertain when the last time it was that he had spoken to Crystal was, but Crystal had told investigators that it was back in 2016. Anthony said that after that, he had no idea on how to get a hold of Crystal. Anthony was living in Utah. He was working as a server at Texas Roadhouse, and he was relaxing at his home after his shifts when the cops arrived. They asked him if he knew Crystal, and he said he did, but he had no idea what was going on. His sister then testified with photos that showed her brother with other relatives in Utah and in Idaho on the dates that the stalker had sent the photos, allegedly showing that he was in Colorado. It's basically solidified his alibi in many ways. Now, a GoFundMe has been set up for the Krug children who have now lost both of their parents, one to murder and the other possibly to life in prison. It states that the funds will only be used for the children, and all three of whom are living with relatives. I will have that link down below if you would like to support. But do you believe that Daniel is the killer? Did her ex-boyfriend have anything to do with it? I'm horrified to say that this case might be a if I can't have you, no one can. And the statement from her brother that the police knew that Daniel was a suspect allegedly in November and failed to tell the victim to protect herself is horrifying. If this is true, could that have been the difference between life and death? Or did she already have suspicion that it was her husband doing these messages and she already had her guard up? It just was too late that day. It seems to me that she wasn't trusting anyone at this point, but that morning, I'm not sure if she even realized that Daniel was still home. That was not a part of the routine. She was used to coming home and being alone. She even had that gun on her, but didn't even have time to grab it before she was attacked. I think that this husband wanted so badly to be the victim here, saying that his wife was cheating on him, stating that it was always the husband being looked at for the murder, and even the fact that he was sick that morning. It appeared to be more about poor him rather than his murdered wife. What angers me the most, though, is the amount of fear that Crystal had gone through in the months prior to her death. This is something that took over her life. She was in distress. She was on guard 24/7. She was worried about her husband and her children, all while the person causing this distress was likely living with them. She did everything right. She told the authorities, got protection, was getting out of this alleged horrible marriage. Yet her husband was planning on how to end her life and frame someone else. But this is all allegedly because the trial is still ongoing and he has not officially been convicted. Though I would be shocked to hear if he is found not guilty, it does happen. So subscribe for updates in this case because I have seen very few media outlets actually covering this case or this trial. So I would love to bring you further information as it comes out. But do you think the IP addresses could have been investigated as soon as Crystal came forward, and then the stalking could have been exposed right then and there that it was her husband? Why wasn't this done as soon as possible, especially if they already had suspicions that it was her husband? You would think that that would be the first thing that they would have done, but I guess they didn't even tell her what they had thought. You know, it's disturbing how many cases I've seen recently where a husband or a wife are plotting to kill or actually going through with the murder of their spouse. It is so disgusting that these people believe that if they can't have them, if they're gonna divorce them, then nobody can have them. It's selfish, it's narcissistic, and it's absolutely disturbing. But I just wanna say again, this woman, Crystal, was not just letting life happen to her. She was very proactive. She was very safety conscious. She was worried about protecting her family, her kids. Like I told you, she hadn't even gone to the police when it was just text to her. But as soon as she got that text about her husband, she knew she had to go in because she cared enough about him to protect him. And look where that got her. This poor woman was so selfless, so strong, so brave, so vulnerable. And the man that she at one point in her life believed was the love of her life, that's why they married, he might just have been the monster that she was letting sleep next to her. And it makes you wonder if cases like this is why there are a lot of people just choosing not to get married and just staying, single for most of their lives. I see it more happening with where males are the perpetrator, where they feel like they are truly entitled to that woman for the rest of her life, and they can't even fathom that the woman would not allow that to happen, or the woman would try to be getting out of that. And I just want all of you out there to be very safe. If you are in a domestic violence situation, I still want you to try to get out. And I still truly believe that is the best situation, but please be very careful about how you're doing it. Please do not show any signs to your spouse. Please do not talk to them about it. It's something where you have to do it in silence. And then once you are out, that is when you can begin that process of the legal separation. But I don't want this to discourage any of you from taking those steps towards a divorce or towards getting out of these situations, because you are just as vulnerable and in danger in the situation as you could be out of it. It's just a possibility as you are leaving, whereas it is imminent when you are in that situation. It's always better to get out. You are strong enough to do so. I truly believe that. And I think Crystal should be seen as an inspiration to keep fighting, to keep protecting. She was afraid, but she was a woman who went out and got a gun and said, I'm not just going to lay here helplessly. I think she should serve as an inspiration to all of us to fight. So thank you guys so much for watching. I will have a new video up on Sunday. And don't forget to speak up. Your voice is powerful enough. And I love you to absolute pieces. Okay.